Today we're going to learn how to write multiplication and division in different ways. Okay, we'll start out with the traditional way for multiplication. So the traditional way, let's say we want to do 3 times 4, would simply be to write 3 with an X, 4. Okay, so that's your traditional way, the most common way that you're going to see it, 3 times 4. But there are other ways to write multiplication problems as well. One way that you might see it could look like this. 3 with a dot, 4. That also can mean multiplication. So if you ever see something that looks like that, that means they want you to multiply those two numbers together. Now here's another way, and this is actually going to be on your test, so really pay close attention to this and always try to remember it. You could also do this. 3, and then in brackets, 4. Now there's no sign. So anytime you see two numbers next to each other with brackets or maybe quotes or parentheses, something like that, if they're right next to each other with no sign, that means they want you to multiply the two together. So this is actually 3 times 4. It's not a weird looking 34. It's actually 3 times 4. So those are the different ways that you can write multiplication. Now let's talk about different ways that you can write division. Okay, so let's start with the traditional way. 12 divided by 3. Okay, so you can see the traditional sign. It's got the little line segment and the dot above it and the dot below it. That's the traditional way that you would write a division problem. But there are other ways to do it as well. We can have a box. So in a box, you would write it like this. You create your little box. Okay. The 12 would go on the inside. The big number goes on the inside. That's what's going to get divided up into equal parts. The other number is going to go on the outside of the box. Okay, so when you read it, you kind of read it backwards from what you're used to. You would say 12 divided by 3. Over here, you go from left to right, 12 divided by 3. So when reading it in a box, you actually read it backwards. 12 divided by 3. So the box is another way you can write a division problem. Okay, here's the last way, and this is actually becoming a very common way because they really want you to think about numbers in this sense a lot. Okay, writing it as a fraction. Okay, so as a fraction, it would look like this: 12. Then you have your fraction bar, and then you have your 3. Okay. So this is 12 divided by 3. 12 divided by 3. This is called the numerator, and this is called the denominator. Okay? So your 3 ways for writing division: the traditional sign with the line and the dot above and the dot below, in a box where you read it backwards, and then when you write it as a fraction, you read it from top to bottom, 12 divided by 3. So those are all the different ways that you can write division problems. So on your own, I want you to go ahead and practice writing several facts and practice writing in a variety of different ways. So right now, I'm going to write some out for you, and then I'm going to have you pause it, and then I'll show you some answers as to how to write them. So let's just have you start by practicing, let's say, 4 times 5, and write it in 2 other ways. And then I also want you to practice 16 divided by 4, and I want you to practice writing that in 2 different ways. So go ahead and click pause, and then when you come back, you can see the answers and see how you did. Okay, so now you should be back after pausing and doing your work. So for 4 times 5, You could also have done 4.5. That means 4 times 5. You also could have done, for 4 times 5, 4, a little bracket around it, 5. Two numbers right next to each other with no sign, that means you multiply. For your division, you could have done 16, then your box, 4 on the outside. This is 16 divided by 4. Okay, that's using the box. And eventually you'll get into something called long division, where for long division you always use the box. Okay, and then the other division one is like a fraction, so you could have done 16 divided by 4. We actually call this an improper fraction because the bigger number's on the top. Okay, that's not a normal thing for a fraction, so they call it an improper fraction. Your answer is going to be something that's 1, well, actually bigger than 1 if it's an improper fraction. Okay, so it's going to be, most fractions you think of something that's less than 1. Well, improper fractions, when you actually do the division, all fractions or division problems, you're going to get an answer that's greater than 1. So those are all the different ways you can write multiplication and division. So practice some more on your own. Try to remember how to do all those methods.